Hello everyone, thank you for joining us on this edition of The Inside. I am Bable Jonathan. Today we are examining, or better still analyzing, issues in connection to personal data protection. Unauthorized access to personal data is a growing threat today to individuals, institutions, businesses, and other entities, and even nations. It often leads to severe consequences, including identity theft, financial loss, reputational damage, legal repercussions, and breaches of privacy, potentially impacting individuals, businesses, and even governments by exposing sensitive information like names, addresses, and credit card numbers without permission, allowing criminals to commit fraud or other crimes, sometimes in the victim's name. And unauthorized access to data, unauthorized users often compromise financial data, trade secret, personal information, and other sensitive data, which of course may lead to identity theft, as I said earlier, damage to reputation, and legal consequences. And Cameroon recently enacted a data protection law called which officially regulates the protection of personal data in the country. But how much does this law, how much protection can this law provide to Cameroonians and foreigners living in the country? Our guest today is NDAKUNA FONSO Amidou. He's a data protection expert and consultant working for several companies around the globe and also advising the UK government in that perspective. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Right, tell us a little more about yourself. You are a data expert and you're working for several companies, consultancy for several companies around the globe, and you're also advising the UK government.
Yes. So I am Cameroonian, born and bred, but I split my time between Cameroon and the UK. 8 years ago, I started working in this space. The way I work with my clients is I primarily help them understand the obligations that they have to protect information, what we call personal information. And this is any information through which an individual can be identified. The way I do is I work with them, I look at the law in each country, I help them break down how they should be implemented, work through a strategy, gap analysis, which will help us highlight the risk exposure, because this is very risk-based. You want to be able to address your biggest risk first. So based on the gap analysis, I will come out with a program for them. We will have a discussion, and then we will go through it to remediate whatever gaps have been found in the gap analysis. So I do this in collaboration with the biggest data privacy consultancy boutique called Securus, headquartered in the UK, but in collaboration with them, we work in over 60 countries already, and we're helping local companies, multinationals, to address the compliance related to data protection in those countries.
Right, and of course you're advising the UK government. What precisely is your job in the perspective of advising the UK government in terms of data protection, personal data protection?
So the job, what you do as a data expert or data protection expert or consultant actually doesn't change a lot. Of course, the context does change, but in terms of the steps, the products or artifacts that you end up producing, which the company can have as evidence for implementation, they don't really change that much. But what I do from a high level, like I said, I will come in. The first thing we'll do is to have a discussion with them. I would interview some key people in the organization. So this is like head of compliance, head of legal, or HR. Doing this gives me a very good idea of what the biggest risks are. Remember from the start of this discussion, I mentioned that this is very risk-based. So from there, we, I'll come up with recommendations of how to proceed. I mentioned already gap analysis. Once you have done your gap analysis, you know maybe the top 10 risks you want to address. You then translate that into a program and then projects. In this project, what you are doing are very specific things. So one project would entail writing policies, for example. So when you look at the Cameroon law, you can break every chapter of that into themes, right? And for those themes, you will need to write policy. So an example is, we look within the law, there's something called data subject rights. These are rights that are given to you and me and everyone watching us to be able to exercise with any organization who is collecting, storing, using, sharing, retaining this, personal information. So we have a project that is just to write policy. We will have another one to write privacy notices. I can come back and explain what this means. You have another project to write to implement processes, because as I've just mentioned, you and me are given rights to be able to exercise. For you to be able to do that, the organization that has your information needs to have an end-to-end process to be able to find what you are asking for and to respond on time.
Private notices.
Privacy notices. So this is, so in the law, there are 4 key things. I just want to explain where that's coming from.
Go ahead.
So one of those 4 things is what we call principles. So principles, when you, in any law around the world, data protection law around the world, the principles are your guiding force. So this is to say, if you can implement or do all the work that you have to do according to the principle, there's a very high probability that you will end up being compliant. Now, in the case of privacy notice, what privacy notice is doing is addressing one of those principles, which is you have to be transparent about everything that you do. So whose data is being processed needs to be informed. So your privacy notice now is the notice that has a lot of information. It's very specific on what you must cover. So you must tell the person that you're collecting that information exactly what information you're collecting. Is it name, telephone number, you list them. You must tell them the purpose for which you're doing that. You must tell them where that information is stored. And if it happens that you're not storing that information within Cameroon, you need to tell them on what basis you're transferring it out of the country. You need to also tell them what rights they have, the way they could make a complaint if they had one, for example. So the privacy notice has to have all of this information, and you have to hand it up front to anyone before you collect their information.
Right. So tell us more about the risk involved in failing to protect personal data. I mentioned some of them: identity theft, financial loss, reputation damage, and can you explain a little bit so we can understand the risk involved in failing to protect personal information?
So the risks are huge, especially as you started talking about one of the most sensitive area, which is financial data. So within the Cameroon law, financial data is what we call sensitive data. So it's important to point out not all of the personal information are sensitive, but financial data is. The risk to exposure here is from a very high level. Don't forget, this is about fundamental human rights and freedoms. So the risks lie in the area where any action, if not done or taken in the right way or done properly, could affect the rights and freedom of this individual. So it could be that the right measures were not put around protecting financial data. It got in, and that information got into the wrong hand. And so if it got into the wrong hand, the customers could then suffer identity theft. So there are many occasions. If you can just think of any instances where maybe you're dealing with a company or the different things you do, and from which where information is collected from you, it's all included. So, but then you can start to look at the risk when we work with a customer based on the principle. Don't forget, I said, if you can work by the principle and make sure they are servant principle, if you can work by them and make sure that everything you've done are in line with the principle, then you give yourself a chance of being compliant at the end. So the risk, they have their origin within not respecting the principle in the first place, right? So one risk would be that you don't have the right security measures in place. So that principle is called integrity, right? It's about protecting the data, and that is exactly speaks to your example as well. You could have other risks around retention, right? One of the principles says you can only retain information for as long as you need it, right? And so you need to be able to justify why you want to keep a piece of information you collected for someone for a year, for 2 years, or even 6 months.
For a specific purpose?
For a specific purpose, very correct. And that is one of the principles again says is purpose limitation. What that means is, if I came to you and I collected, I'm a company out there, I'm offering financial service. You came, you gave me your information, maybe to
create an account, for example, in a bank.
Exactly. Create an account, and I collect some information in that process. I cannot then turn around and use that information to start maybe offering you loans or marketing for things that you hadn't requested for. Again, back to the privacy notice. Before I collect that information to create an account, I'm supposed to present you with a privacy notice that says exactly what the purpose is, and I'm not supposed to deviate from that.
And if you want to share it with a third party, definitely that should be done in agreement with the information holder.
You are spot on. That's perfectly correct. So there is no taboo in sharing information, but you have to do it the right way. The law is very clear on how you can share information, in what context. And again, if you were to collect information to create an account and maybe share, say with a sister company within the same, say multinational, you have to mention it in the privacy notice. Again, back to the right to be informed, right? Transparency.
Right. So when you look at the way this is done in the Cameroon,
right,
do you think that there is the risk is higher when we're talking about protection, which seems not to be very much of a reality in Cameroon, with information shared without even your consent? Sometimes you have another person giving you information that is supposed to be private, and you're asking yourself, how did he get the information?
Right. So the first thing I will say is the data protection law in Cameroon just came out last month. It's very new. In terms of implementation, nothing is started here yet. However, the fact that the law is new does not mean that everything to be implemented to comply with the law is entirely absent. No, that's not correct. So a lot of companies out there already have things like information security standards implemented. This all goes to your security principle around confidentiality, integrity, and availability, which is how, from a very technical perspective, how you protect that information. Privacy builds on that. So I guess the work now for organization in this organization, both public and private, organization in Cameroon now is to look at, how to build from what they already have, because most of them, like I said, would have had this baseline. But in terms of risk, whatever you find in terms of data privacy risk would be something that all organizations out in Cameroon would be exposed to at the moment. But like I said, there is a baseline from which they can build and make this better.
Thus, failure to protect personal information create an enabling environment for hackers to get into people's accounts and carry out some kind of fraudulent activities and things like that.
Again, you're spot on with that. You've mentioned something that relates to what we call organizational measures, right? So, in order to be compliant, any organization out there has to take certain measures. Those measures can be technical or organizational. Technical measures could mean that the information you just spoken about is encrypted, right? So protected. On the other hand, you could have password policies, for example. You could have incident management processes put in place. The incident management process is important, for example, because once in the event that the data the data is not protected as you want it to be, an accident occurs, which we call data breach, then you will need to have an incident management process in place to quickly run through what has happened, who has been involved, what has been exposed, what are the possible risks to the people that are involved. Because if you think about this happening to a database, it will probably be a database of your customers, right? But you want to quickly, once you identify it, you want to quickly run through that process and make sure that the necessary actions are taken, maybe just to, not to eradicate, but maybe just to stop initially to contain it, and then eradication can come later on. But yes, I think all of this goes back to one thing, which is when you have sensitive information, that information should only be accessible to people that need to have access to it, right? And so when you don't have control over that, or you don't have access control list of the people that should have access to certain information, and you monitor that over time, then accidents like that could happen.
All right, let's take a look at what the newspapers reported this week, and we'll be right back in a moment to take a look at the data protection law enacted in Cameroon in 2014. That was just last year. We're coming back in a short while. The Guardian Post reports that as tension mounts over the launching of the Mabedbet National Park in the far north region of Cameroon, the Minister of Territorial Administration, Atanganji Paul, is on a firefighting mission to appease angry Mayokani population. And Municipal Update says the Prime Minister, Chief Dr. Joseph John Goody, has ordered an inquiry to address the squabbles over the Mabedbet National Park. And ahead of the 2025 presidential election, another issue of the Guardian Post reports that Honorable Jean-Michel Nicho has warned there will be no election if Professor Maurice Kamto, national president and presidential aspirant of the Cameroon Renaissance Movement, CRM political party, is not a candidate. According to The Voice, craving beer appeals to youth ahead of elections in Youth Day address. The paper pays a tribute to former Supreme Court Judge Paul Labine, saying they killed him and made him leave. The Post and Cameroon Tribune report an extract of President Paul Biya's address to young people, February 10, 2025. Whatever the criticism, I will always speak the language of truth to you. The Median says President Paul Biya's solution to youth unemployment, frustration, and illegal immigration failed to reassure the young people. Cameroon Insider highlights President Paul Biya's announcement of hope for more jobs and self-employment support in his Youth Day message. And Municipal Update tells its readers that President Paul Biya ordered the setting up of municipal employment offices to tackle youth unemployment. Cameroon echoes reports advocacy for the installation of the telecommunications network in Tiko in the southwest region of Cameroon during the Cameroon People's Democratic Movement CPDM Youth Wing Indian 6 Toko Section Conference. Newswatch projects the establishment of a new mechanism to boost security in the Douala port. And in another issue of the Guardian Post, the paper reports that stakeholders have validated the Douala Port Authority Phase 2 security project. In the Herald Tribune, the Port Authority says the achievement is in line with the Head of State's 2035 vision of an emerging nation. The Advocate, how Sonora made big win in London High Court case. Centum for Nico Hale gets a rare British-American University honors. Plus, Southwest and Northwest Women's Task Force restructuring paves way for new leadership era. Another issue of Cameroon Tribune qualifies Tuburu in the far north region of Cameroon as an epicenter of trade, living together, and security. Thank you for staying with us. We're talking about the importance of protecting personal information. And recently, Cameroon enacted a data protection law, law number 2024/0017, which officially regulates the protection of personal data in the country, making or marking a significant step in the safeguarding individual privacy within the digital landscape. And this law was recently adopted by the country's parliament. Now, you've read through that law.
Yes.
What's your take?
I will start by saying great news. We have a law, right? We didn't have one before. That's a big step because there are still many countries around the world without a law as we speak. But having said that, I think that there is a lot of work to be done in terms of how we take that forward. Whether we think about implementation, whether from a structural point of view, or just making the law easier for people or organizations to be able to implement it. Because don't forget, someone has to read that law, read a sentence, and translate that sentence into something you can demonstrate as evidence, into an artifact.
And interpret
exactly. So even the way you phrase anything in it is important, right? And I think I'll probably just talk about one or two observations I made there. The first is some things have either been omitted or poorly phrased. So I think about something like one of the key areas within any data protection law around the world, and have read tens of them, is what we call legal basis for processing, right? Legal basis for, you must have a legal basis for processing before you can collect and process any data. By processing, I mean collection, storage, sharing, retention, etc. Right? That's the meaning. So, in the Cameroon law, Cameroon has joined a group of countries that have law that are primarily based on what we call consent. Now, consent is one of those legal bases. Most laws will have 5 or 6 of them. That does have a huge implications on how you implement that law in this country. And I can go into why, because consent is the biggest or the most difficult legal basis to be implemented for data protection. You need to implement processes, you need to be, because if you look at the Cameroon law, it's the defines consents that you, to say that you've obtained consent from someone, it has to be freely given, it has to be explicit, it has to be concise, and all of those terms describing consent means that you cannot just tick a box and say you've obtained consent from Babila. What you need to do is to be able to have a consent management process. So when Babila says, I give you my consent, you take it, you have a way of managing that record. If you come back tomorrow and say, I don't consent anymore, I should be able to go get that record out, make the necessary change to it, And there are other things around consent. But the point I'm really trying to highlight is we have chosen in this law to depend on one legal basis. And that is the most difficult legal basis to implement. I have been doing this job for the last 8 years. I have seen this. I have seen this particular scenario in different countries, and the type of difficulties it could bring in terms of implementing the data protection law. The other thing before
before you go forward to tell us about the other observation that you made up concerning the law in Cameroon, the law on data protection. When you talk about consent, I just want you to be a little more elaborate in the perspective of having or looking at that particular aspect throughout the whole process of information, that is from collection to how you're exploiting the information, sharing the information, and everything. Consent runs through, is that?
Correct. So if you look at the data lifecycle management, if you're a customer, you walk into a building for whatever business reason that is, they will collect your information. They will store it somewhere. They will have a number of people within that organization accessing it. They might decide to share it. They would then decide how long they want to store it, to retain it for. Don't forget, all of these things were highlighted in the privacy notice that we just spoke about. So before you came in, before I collected that information, or an organization collects that information, they are supposed to present you that privacy notice. So that privacy notice also contain or has the legal basis written in it. If you're processing on consent, consent will be clearly mentioned there. But it means that all those activities from collection to retention are covered on that legal basis. You might have some processes where, because of the number of activities that are going on in that process, you need more than one legal basis. That's possible. But I think we're at the point where we're trying to, just get people get a gist of what this is about. Those type of processes, start being a bit more complicated, and I probably don't think that's we can have another session to discuss something like that. Yeah.
Right. So, in a nutshell, the information holder must give his or her consent before anything happens with data, with information concerning him or her.
Yes and no. So and this is where I say there's a problem with just having consent, because you're an employee. If you're an employee of this establishment shouldn't really be processing your data under consent. Maybe something like contract, which is another legal basis. Now you've come in, they say, because you're starting work new, we need to see, your personal identifications and things like that. That's very normal. You collect that under contract. But as you start working here, they approach you and they say, Mr. Babila, you look, we have some employees benefits. There's a gym, open downstairs that is open for employees to use. There are other benefits. Now, you don't really need to do that within the contract. You start to think, about other legal bases. So this can fall more in the remits of something we call legitimate interest, right? So if you say that we can only do things under consent, then when you move into the territory of employees' benefit, you can't really say consent, because it's not appropriate to use that, right? Again, I define consent, what consent stands for at the start. So the current law has these difficulties already, and it's something that I think the right authority should look into. The way that this law is supposed to be implemented nationwide is such that an independent body or supervisory authority for data protection is supposed to be set up. Independent from government, because government is also needs to be compliant. This is, don't forget, this is both public and private sector. So that independent body now has, or it's not yet been created as far as I know. Once it's done, they now have the responsibility to now look into the law and say, okay, these are the things that, you know, are currently, you know, we should be discussing this and looking at how, you know, how to amend it and make it easier for people to implement.
You tell us a little more why you think that an independent institution should manage all of that, right, instead of, for example, the Ministry of Telecommunications to handle all of that. But before that, you had a second observation, right, on the data protection law in Cameroon. What was that?
The other thing is, I believe there was very, very little consultation. I mean, when you read the law, like I said, some things are actually omitted. There's something called data protection officer. It's a role which in any country, in any data protection law around the world, they play an instrumental role because they are the link between this supervisory authority that I just spoke about and any organization. And they also meant to be not sit on the board of that particular organization to maintain, you know, the remit within the need to operate, because you know, it's about implementing the law. It's about telling the organization, you know, how to do it in the right way, and, you know, and being neutral in their role. So that is important and needs to be looked into. And once that supervisory authority is set up, that's one of the things that we'll be picking up. So consultation, how we can move on from here, if I can suggest something, is we are in a country where data privacy awareness is very low. So there's a lot of work to be done in terms of just getting people up to speed, you know, getting them to understand how, you know, the importance of this, their role, etc. And the supervisory authority cannot do this alone. The organization in the public and private sector cannot do it alone because of the amount of resources that are required. So my suggestion is to, you know, for trade unions, for industry bodies, for, you know, to work with supervisory authority and the, you know, obviously the organizations as well, to make sure that we're singing from the same hymn sheet. Because I believe if in the consultation someone like me with my knowledge was spoken to, some of the things you have in the law which I'm talking about now wouldn't have appeared in the law. I'm pretty sure.
Right. You know, in Cameroon today, some observers who think that there are just too many institutions with some really producing little or nothing, right, but consuming a lot of money.
Right.
And now you're talking about another institution, a national authority, a national data protection authority, and some will tell you, no, it should just be maybe a department in the Ministry of Telecommunications, for example. Why do you think that there should be an independent body to handle this issue of personal data protection?
Right. I think maybe for two reasons. This is about fundamental human rights, don't forget. And this is only going to get more serious if you think about the amount of data that is being produced, right? So you need an independent supervisory authority, number one, because of the scale of the work that needs to be done. You need someone who can enforce what the law is saying, who is focused on it, who is doing it Monday to Friday, you know, and for all, you know, that is their main focus. If you think about the amount of organizations in this country, I mean, if you remember my definition of personal information, it means that your institution, Equinoxe TV, has to comply with this law, right? And you just imagine how many organizations like that. We are at the end, there are thousands. You know, they might even go to millions, right? You need that body that is focused on it. Otherwise, we will have people not doing what the law is saying, and you need to prove to people that the law has some teeth. And that's why you have fines in the law. You cannot find an organization if you haven't taken the time to see where they are going wrong, to do an audit. You know, so the supervisory authority, because of the scale of the work, has a number of functions, and I think it's very important that which leads into my second point, which is, you know, we need to separate it from the telecom, because the telecom regulatory authority is already doing a lot of work, and so we need to give that focus. We need, you know, it's an institution with, you know, the right resources, you know, focus on doing this particular work, and of course, you know, being independent in that process. I don't know too much about the telecom regulatory authority, but it has to have clear, you know, independence from the government, because the government also, or the government ministries, have to comply with the law.
Clear independence from the government. That may be where there will be a lot of issues in Cameroon, because when we look at the way the country is functioning, we really think, like many observers will put it, that everything is centered on the presidency, if not the president of the republic. And even some of the institutions that are said to be independent, like elections, Cameroon, that's something else. It's in another domain. But you know, and you're saying that it should be totally independent from the government. And
I'm not just recommending this for Cameroon. This is, by the way it's set up in every country. In every country around the world where I've worked, and I told you tens of them, this is how it works. Not only, and I'm not talking just about European countries. I work in Chile, I work in Peru, I worked in South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe. So it's something. If we're serious about what we want to do with the law, then we have to, you know, we have to take the necessary steps to make that happen. I think your point, that point kind of goes into more structural and political setup, etc. But I think every country is at a particular stage in its development and in building institutions, because I think this goes into kind of what you call inclusive institutions, and having, you know, separate power separation, etc., which is a bigger discussion away from data privacy.
Right. What we retain simply is that it should be independent,
yes,
to avoid issues like influence peddling and all of that that could impede its work. And now, tell us a little more about how important personal data protection is to every individual. You have a bank account or you don't have, even personal information that is not necessarily in a bank or an institution, just personal information. How important is this law?
So this law is the biggest thing I find, or the biggest positive aspect of the law that I find, is the rights which have been given to you and me and anyone watching us to go to any institution to whom we have shared our personal information with, to say, to exercise them. One of them is you right to access information. So you go to them, you make a request, you say, please show me everything that you have on me. You know, again, they're supposed to have implemented processes to be able to do this within a certain timeline. They go, they look for whatever, you know, they go, they search for Babila, they need to know already, they need to know these different systems where they are storing your information, and then they come back and present that information to you. You can look at that information now and say, no, but this is not correct. this particular thing about what you've just presented to me is not correct, and I want you to rectify it. You can even go as far as asking in certain context for your information to be erased totally. But I have to also point out that those rights, some of them are not absolute right. What I mean is, if you went to a bank and say they should erase your information, the bank has to weigh up, that against the service that are supposed to provide to you. So if they delete your information as you've requested, can they still serve you? Will be an important question. And if the question is no, so long as you remain a customer of the bank, they will tell you, they can't delete it, and it's right within the law.
Definitely, some of the information, as far as that example is concerned, would only be deleted once you close that account.
Yes. So this leads us into retention. So again, in the privacy notice, they would have, the company should, talked about how long they want to, keep this information for. And what normally happens is, before the end of your relationship with the organization, they should already have in plan how long they want to keep the information after the relationship has elapsed, right? And sometimes it might be because you might want to keep information because the tax authority might come looking for it, and so that gives you the justification to keep that information for that length of time. If, for example, we're saying that an institution has to keep a transactions history for this number of years before they delete, because there could be an investigation that needs to use that information. So it's at that point you make a decision about retention, and then when the retention time comes up, then you have to delete that information.
Let's take some few interviews, and we'll be right back in a moment. Interviews of the week.
One of the main issues, as you may know, that is not taking us anywhere, when I mean us, those of us from the former Southern Cameroons, is the division amongst us. We are so divided, and that has caused us a lot of problems, because we cannot or would hardly agree on a way forward. So that on its own has defeated us completely. It's made us to be insignificant. And when a house is divided, the enemy can easily come in. There is no peace. There is no moving forward. We destroy ourselves. We completely regress instead of progress. So we are hoping, and we are working hard to make sure, as a positive to this memorandum of understanding, there is that agreement, and we are going to forge ahead in looking into the various ways in which the lives of our people will be better. We would be able to stand as a voice when necessary to demand to the government, or any government that may come up after 2025 or so, to put our case, or the case of the people of former Southern Cameroons, stronger, as opposed to a situation where we have individuals or factions coming in and telling and saying, oh yes, I'm the one representing the people of former Southern Cameroons. These are our grievances. Now, us coming together via this memorandum of understanding eliminates, I would say, factions asking for different things. The fact that we are now agreeing to work together is a very, very massive step forward. And henceforth, as you can see from that document, we are going to implement a lot of things to do with our people, with the international community, so as to push forth the agenda of an agreed stand for the people of former Southern Cameroon. It's only when we come together, as we have done, that these would happen. It's only via this coming together that we would have a stronger voice, or one voice asking for the same thing. And all this would completely change the lives of the people of former Southern Cameroons. With regards to federalists, we believe that it is only via a political process that we would be treated fairly in that country, because we believe in one Cameroon. We believe in one Cameroon, and we believe in one nation, which is a federal nation, a federal state. That way, we think under the I would say under the principles that govern a federalist system, we would be able to benefit as a people without being, I would say, marginalized or without any attempt to assimilate us. It would give us that sense and purpose of our own, to say, autonomy to do things. We would have to elect our DOs, we would have to elect our governors ourselves without them being imposed on us. So this is what a federalist state would bring. But as a whole, while we are bringing this on the table within the memorandum of understanding, it would mean that our people, as we've agreed, we are having more support now to push forth with our agenda for federalism. That's to say, our brothers and sisters who believe in separation would not, or will not say, oh, because I don't believe in federalism, I will not support federalism. It's rather, as an individual, I have a choice and to decide on what I want, but I am also not going to stop the other person from doing what they want or what they choose to do. So this memorandum of understanding is going to go a very long way. We are at the early stages where it's just, we are asking our brothers and sisters of the former Southern Cameroons to now understand that there is progress on the way.
Right.
What we need from them is to support us as we move forward.
If you don't give your youths the skills and the tools that they need, then Cameroon will never change, then there will always be problems. So I guess he touched on one of the most important aspects of youth and youth development, and what would contribute to youth being responsible, youth being peaceful, and so on. But I think he didn't have time to dwell into the specifics and go into details. So I would want to thank him for highlighting that, because as you know, over the years, over 60 years, our education has been wrong. We have been doing the wrong thing in Cameroon and calling it education, where we study subjects and we give thousands and thousands of youths all sorts of degrees and certificates. But the unfortunate thing has been that these certificates are not accompanied by skills. It is the skills. A certificate is should be a proof of the fact that you've got skills. But if you have certificates just with head knowledge and no skills to solve problems, then we'll continue to have problems. And therefore, the president was addressing this key aspect of it and saying that, look, from now going forward, the nation is going to change the education in Cameroon so that we concentrate on giving our youths more skills, more hands-on, and making them, making of them people who have the capacity to solve problems and not just tell stories. If you go back and look at most of the president's speeches over the years, it has a certain pattern. And this time around, he came up with the salutations and greeted the youth and everybody. And by the time he was entering the second paragraph or so, he started already to blame the international community for our problems. And I just want to say that in life, if you keep on blaming other people for problems that you ought to have solved yourself, then you are never going to change. I'm saying that, yes, Cameroon has problems. And when you do have problems in life, some of these problems can be visited on you by yourself, by what you do or what you fail to do. Or these problems can be brought on you by external factors. Okay, that's the international community that he has been referring to. Or it could be an act of God. But But God has done it in such a way that He has given us the capabilities to be able to solve our problems and stop blaming people. And I would love that Cameroonians should stop blaming the international community for our economic problems, for our problems of politics, for our problems of underdevelopment, and our problems of a failed education, our problems of bad governance. So let us take responsibility. You know, one of the elements in the theme of this year, I think, is responsibility and maturity. You cannot be responsible and mature and keep blaming other people for not being able to wipe your nose. So we import rice and we blame the Ukrainians for having a war. We blame God for not giving us rain and fertile lands to grow the rice. We blame God for not giving us tractors. I mean, we keep blaming everybody, and we don't take responsibility for solving our problems. In fact, if we took on the responsibility to address ourselves to our problems ourselves, 70% of our problems and the things we moan and groan about will go away. And I think that when the president now is saying that we need to change our education, it's because he has come to a place where he has realized that the way we have been training youth before does not give them the skills and the tools to solve our problems. And until they are able to solve our youth are able to solve our problems, we are beating around the bush and will continue to blame other people for things that we ought to do ourselves. When the president was mentioning these special schools in Nanga, Eboko, and wherever, I think there's one of those schools here in Douala somewhere with some red roofs, in Bepanda somewhere there. And then if you notice, there's another school too on the way to Limbe. After Ombe, on the way to Limbe, on your right, you have another school like that. These are supposed to be specialized professional schools where children are taught technology and skills and so on. But number one, they are so few. These were supposed to be pilot centers, and the many other schools are supposed to copy from their good example. Now, if you are talking of a good secondary or high school in Cameroon, a good example, I will mention Lycée Polyvalent de Bonaberi. What is the Lycée Polyvalent? In English is the comprehensive college. The concept of comprehensive college is what should happen to our school systems. This thing of breaking up the school into grammar schools and technical colleges is wrong. You put all children together, you know, take those subjects that we are teaching in the grammar schools, bring them on board, and then bring all the technical subjects and throw them in the mix. And then to add to that, you add a couple of other skills like leadership, entrepreneurship, and all those. And let the children just go through this and introduce them more to skills than just head knowledge. Whatever they read in physics, they should go to the laboratory and do the experiments to prove it. When you teach children theory, and they go to the laboratory and can back it up, you know, with the laboratory work. And then they show it how it's working in the technical world, which is technology. Then they are good to go. But if you keep giving them head knowledge where they have no laboratories and they have to keep imagining things, it will not work.
The educational system that we have is not a job-creating educational system. It's not an educational system that actually produces professionals, entrepreneurs, and so on. It's an educational system that helps people to read and write and to score marks and come out and start searching for jobs. So it's not actually job-oriented or job creation-oriented educational system that we have. So the educational system, I thought that the head of state would say that there are new orientation in the educational sector that will be able to enable Cameroonians to be able to become job creators so that they will be entrepreneurial in their during their graduation, so that they will be able to open businesses and so on, become entrepreneurs and become self-reliant and self-employed. But he did not touch that. He had been saying one and same thing for the past years, and nothing serious was said about the education of the youth. Now, concerning job creation, permit me to say this, that there was nothing in the head of state speech that actually talked about job creation. You know, job creation is an issue of the private sector. It's a private sector that creates jobs. It's not a government. A government that struggles to create jobs, to pay people and to remove money that they're supposed to use to build roads, build hospitals, and provide water and electricity for people, to employ people, to start paying them, is not the assignment of the government. So we thought that the government tell us about major projects that are in place to bring in companies that are going to create jobs for the youth. But nothing was said about this. Unfortunately, he started his speech from a very bad note by quoting the indomitable lion. What has the indomitable lions got to do with the youths? That had nothing to do with the youth. The youths are unemployed, the youths are poor, the youths are frustrated. What has the indomitable lions got to do with the youth? So that was a bad start, showing that there was nothing. He already showed that there was nothing in the speech. So I just wish to say that the head of state, truly speaking, the government is tired and the government has no way forward. The government has no solution for the youth. So I wish that the youth should listen to me. This is my advice to the youth. Youth, be able to look at what can help you to become self-employed and go in for it yourself.
Awards mean nothing. They also mean something. 190 awards plus the number we are having today, 193. They only humble me. They come from God, not from man. They are not even from Nico Halley. Because God uses me as an instrument in his vineyard, and they humble me. You know so well that men are led by toys. Napoleon Bonaparte. If I don't use all these awards, certificates, distinctions, medals, trophies, and what have you to God's glory, then they represent nothing. I have rejected more than 12 that were pegged on money, pecuniary advantages. And it took me more than 2 weeks to go online and to check to be sure that the doctorate honoris causa, and of course this is the second, I had one in 2007, 2008, after my trip to Zimbabwe, where I brokered peace between Morgan and Mugabe. You hear of power sharing, it's Nico Halley. Yes, I was sent there by the African Union, not by any other person. And that job, my trip to Zimbabwe, where I spent nearly 8 weeks, and it in fact punctured, I would say, deflated the violence that was in the air, because I went there with a Bible. I didn't go there with a gun. I went there to talk love, talk peace, harmony. And each time we had a meeting, I started the meeting with a prayer. And I always quoted Matthew 22:37 to 39. You know that is the greatest commandment in the world. Love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. God has blessed this world with a lot of resources, but we are going cap in hand because we go around without the Holy Spirit. We are more interested in looting, plundering, pillaging, devastating the resources that are meant for humanity. And that's why there's a very high level of poverty and unemployment. For you to be a peace crusader, you must be one who is talking peace with justice. Peace without justice is empty peace. It's ephemeral, it's short-lived, it's transient. So my peace crusading for over 30 years has been placed on the platform of love, justice, equity, transparency, accountability, dignity, and honor, nobility, patriotism, the fear of the Lord. Because what is in a doctorate? You can be a professor 1 million years. If you are not impacting society positively, your professorship is zero. Your doctorship is zero. Your lawyership is zero. you are a lawyer and you are not impacting society positively, putting smiles on people's faces, then you are, what kind of lawyer are you? All along, I've faced challenges. You know, whether you like it or not, each time you are uplifted, know that you are harvesting more enemies. Each time you are uplifted, take note. If you have not known this, know that today. Man is vile, wicked, villain, devilish, and satanic. That each time you are uplifted, you are praised, it brings bitterness in some people. Let me tell you, never you waste 1 minute with detractors, because that is their own area. You cannot stop them from being detractors. You continue doing what God has asked you to do. You have a lifespan, you must impact the world.
The award is in 2 categories. The first one is called honoris causa, which has to do with the honorary doctorate degree given to a scholar considering the person's quintessential achievement in his or own area of specialty. So for today, Nico Halley has been nominated based on our fact-finding about his achievement. He's the only one in Cameroon here that has been awarded this honoris causa today. And the award comes from the British American Open University of California, in which our own international institute, known as Peace International Interdisciplinary Research Institute in Abuja, is an affiliate of United Nations, which is the body that also conferred today on Nico Halley the Global Peace Ambassador Award. Of course, there could be many other peace crusaders, but our concern is on some core values. And these core values, we have seen integrity in him, we have seen honesty, we have seen uprightness, and most importantly, we have checked his records are clean. We expect that based on this recognition, this global peace ambassador recognition, we are going to encourage our own laureate, Nico Halley, to do more, because to him much is given, much is also expected. So on this premise, we are very optimistic that what is happening today will give him the courage to do more, because he knows that the world all over now expect more from him.
You're welcome back. We are rounding up this edition of the program with our guest, NDAKUNA FONSO Amidou, data protection expert and consultant. You have been offering your services as an expert in data protection to many countries around the globe, UK, Peru, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and all the rest that you mentioned. And why not your country, Cameroon?
So that's why I felt, the timing couldn't have been, right for me to come here and have this conversation with you. As you know, we had a discussion off camera. I already do a lot here with different business activities, but that's because I feel that Cameroon needs me more than all the developed nations who have nothing, nothing in terms of certain level of development. They've already gone, things that Cameroon is still struggling with. So I am particularly, looking and forward-looking and wanting to work with people in this environment, especially at this juncture where you need experts, people who understand what's going on to be able to implement this law. And I just want to say this is very important to any organization thinking about implementing this law. There are 3 things I want them to know. The first one is this law is not it's not a sprint, but it is a marathon. You need a long-term commitment. You need to take sustainable actions. You need to think globally and act locally. All of these things if your starting point is being afraid of being fined, then you are wrong in your approach. You need to, my second point is you need to speak to the expert. You want to do this thing at your first attempt. And the final one is, like I already mentioned at the start, the law is new, but everything that you need to be compliant with the law is not entirely new. There are things you can leverage on. But how do you do this? You need the expert guidance to be able to walk you through, hold your hand, and walk you through the process.
You have been doing a lot of things, including in the health sector.
Correct.
Can you share some of what you've been doing with us?
Right. So about 18 years ago, I decided to work within, try and join effort on the ground in Cameroon with or some collaborators to build or improve health infrastructure. So I started out with building a health center back then. But fast forward into the pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic, I then launched the completion of I launched the hospital project. It's a vision the vision is for 400 beds. It's divided into 3 phases. Phase 1 has been completed with about 60 beds, a number of departments. It's work in progress. I'm in second phase of it now, but it gives me joy to be able to, come back to my country and to be able to use the privilege that I have, because I feel I have been privileged to have the exposure, to have my experience, the education that I've had. And so like there's a quote that says, to whom is given, more is expected. And I completely believe in that, and that's why I'm here. And yeah, it would be an absolute pleasure for me to work with different organizations, try and support them on this particular law.
You're a data protection expert, but you choose to carry out some investments in your home country in the health sector.
Right.
What observation did you make? What directed you towards that direction? Did you do some findings, some kind of feasibility studies about the health needs of Cameroon? Because we know that in Cameroon today, health services are not very much available to Cameroonians in many parts of the country, and even in urban centers like Douala, health services are not really the best.
Yeah. So I would be lying to you if I said that I did an in-depth research before starting. It was more of a burning desire, ambition to improve lives than, having had detailed research and the finance. And because of a single incident, I arrived here on one occasion after spending 4 years in the UK. I arrived here on one occasion, and sadly, a lady who lived around us passed away because she had gone to the farm, sustained a wound which was not properly taken care of. I mean, what does it take to clean a wound, right? So for me, I wanted at that point I wanted to do something about it, but I wasn't sure what how this was going to look like. It coincided with my brother also graduating from nursing school, and then one evening I had a discussion with him. And I said, why don't we set up a healthcare center instead of you to go work for government? You can help these underserved communities, where government, the government is not present, and things like that. So that was the beginning, and then obviously in between there were a lot of interactions with other organizations, pharma companies here and there. We kind of grow from there, but make no mistakes, there are lots of challenges, so many of them, but then challenges are present everywhere. I live in London. They are present in London. It might be in different forms, but the point I'm trying to say is there's no place without challenges. And I have one of those challenges I have picked to work on and try to improve is the health sector.
Right. Let's wrap up with your last word on the urgent need to begin to, first of all, to correct some of those loopholes that you have highlighted in the data protection law and implementation, because in Cameroon there are really many good laws, as the legal minds will tell us. There are many good laws, but implementation, that is where there is a big problem. in Cameroon. Sometimes the implementation is in some kind of I don't know if I should put it discriminatory way, but that's not what we're talking about. The need for that law to be corrected and implementation, and for companies to begin to get experts, services like from you to be able to step up personal data protection in Cameroon.
Right. So my final words, maybe 2 points. The first one is regarding the independent supervisory authority. I think that's the first thing that needs to be addressed, because then when you have that institution set up with the right resources, they can now start to move into my second point, which is the consultation and collaborative working environment that I talked about. Because then once it's set up, they know their role, everything is confirmed, people know what their focus are, they can then start working, with the different stakeholders to make sure that this time we get the consultation, we make the consultation more comprehensive.
A broad-based consultation.
Yes. And yes, I think with that, then we will have everyone contributing to this. And then you don't get to a point where organizations start feeling that they are scapegoats, because you have fines at the end of this. If you don't comply, you're going to be fined. And so I think that the government can do a lot in terms of working with all of these organizations before we even get to the point where people are worrying about fines and all of that. The supervisory authority should also be able to produce a lot of guidance around, so looked at the whole law, because it's up, a lot of what is written there is open to interpretation. All the organization on the ground on who have to comply with this need a lot of guidance, and then these documents are expected to come from them. And yeah, I think those two things, the structure, making sure that the structure is confirmed, making sure that there is collaborative working would set us moving on the right path.
Right, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the insights you've shared with us in this edition of the program. The
pleasure is mine. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us. That's it for today. You can follow us on our social media handles on Facebook and on YouTube. You can also follow the rebroadcast of the program on Friday at 5 p.m. Thank you so much for your kind attention. God bless Cameroon.